Can I put that over here? Maybe. Yeah, my assistants aren't here, but that's okay. I'll just let everybody in because then they can chat for a moment.
Perfect.
Hello, good people. We have just 5 minutes before we begin. We let you in early because Maya is prepared, but if anyone is feeling the need to be social, you can say hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Bailey. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. So where are you sitting with that nice little cubicle search behind you?
I'm at Barnegat Bay Partnership. I'm the watershed ambassador, AmeriCorps watershed ambassador for the Barnegat Bay. So I've got my little cube.
Nice. Well, you're going to love it. Did you start in the autumn?
Yes.
So you've been loving it.
I really do. I really do. I'm sure there's going to be some other ambassadors in here soon too.
Probably. Oh, good. There's my assistant. Hello, Radhika. I've let everyone in early because we were set. How are you today?
Perfect. Thank you. Do you want me to do any questions or anything, Anne, to help you?
Yes. Would you be willing to do the co-host because Hugh is not on?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Perfect.
We decided to let everyone in early to say hi. Waiting room. I do love this conference. I miss seeing everyone in person, but I do really love this conference. Hi, Tanya. And Tom Shepard's there and Laura's there. Oh, I see all these people I know. Hi, everyone. We're so glad you're joining us. We will be starting in just 2 minutes. Look at all these prompt people coming in. Isn't this wonderful? Thank you. Thank you.
It took me a week, but I have finally mastered how to get on a Zoom call on time.
Do you start 10 minutes early? Is that it?
Almost. Never seems to be the same experience twice.
Fact, I have 4 different accounts that I have to sign in through. And right now I'm in with the president account. So, ooh, not even president, such privileges. Okay, so According to the church bell outside my window, it is now 1 o'clock, so I'm going to begin on time because I'm nothing if prompt. So welcome everyone. I'm so glad you've come today. I guess you can see the title of our programming, that Maximizing SEL Benefits of Outdoor Learning with Maia Mitchell from Montclair Community Farms. I'll tell you all that just in case you're in the wrong room so you can run out to go to the other group. So let's get started. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ann Price. I'm the program manager of Water Spirit. I'm an ANJEE member and a volunteer. Also with me today is Radhika Inya. Oh, please pronounce your name for me, dear. I don't want to say it incorrectly.
No problem. Radhika Iyengar. Thanks.
Iyengar. Thank you. Thank you. I apologize for not getting that correct. We're excited that you're with us today for the workshop as part of ANJEE's 38th annual winter conference. A special thank you to our conference sponsors, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, an anonymous donor who's a friend of science and environmental education in New Jersey, and the Institute for Natural History Arts. We'd also like to thank our keynote speaker, Naja Ryan Associates, our award sponsors, Duke Farm and BASF for supporting our field experiences. Also, we're placing the link to our YouTube channel in the chat room where you can see all of our recorded content from past conferences, forums, and other sponsored events. We hope you subscribe to ANJEE's YouTube channel. And just a few reminders for this session. We ask that everyone keep yourselves on mute throughout the presentation. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat room. There may be time for live questions toward the end of the presentation, at which point you can either raise your hand or use the hand raising icon and we'll let you ask your questions. So let me introduce Maia Mitchell from Montclair Community Farms. She's our presenter today. Today we'll discuss that research supports what environmental educators already know, that outdoor learning experiences are beneficial for all aspects of children's well-being. Greater time spent outside and in unstructured play has been shown to increase pro-social behavior, emotional regulation, social well-being, confidence, creativity, problem-solving, independence, and so much more. How can we maximize these benefits? Drawing on pedagogical theory and current research, we discuss how you can seize these opportunities and maximize your positive impact. Maia, introduce yourself and let's get started.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Maia Mitchell. I work for Montclair Community Farms as our education director. I'm really excited to talk to you all today about social emotional learning and outdoor learning, how we can capitalize on the opportunities that outdoor learning provide and maximize those benefits. So I'm going to set up my screen share, if you'll give me a moment. Okay, I want to check that you can see my screen. Give me a thumbs up or Anne's nodding. Okay, perfect. And before I dive into the digital presentation, we all really, I hope, try to practice what we preach, and it feels a little out of place that in a presentation that's about social emotional well-being and outdoor learning, we're all inside on our computers and you're probably going to be, or phones, staring at me and listening to me for the next 55 minutes or so. So I just wanted to start by giving us all a moment to really connect, take a moment to pause. So I'm going to ask you all to first take a moment to check your seat in your chair, right? Because being on screens makes us hunch over, which is really bad for our bodies. It's the entire reason I have to go to physical therapy. So check your position in your chair. If you are in a room that has any view to the outdoors, I'd actually like you to take your eyes off of me and off my screen and to something outside. Or if you don't have access to look at something outside, then close your eyes. Take a moment to picture a natural place that you enjoy, or look at a plant nearby you. Anything just to focus your eyes and your mind, and just take a few deep breaths in that space. All you have to do is hear the sound of my voice and focus on what you're looking at. And while you're doing that, I'm going to share a nature poem. So I have a book that I love called Sing a Song of Seasons, and it's a nature poem for each day of the year. And I quite liked the one today, so I'm just going to share it with you all. The poem's called Small, Smaller by Russell Hogan. I thought that I knew all there was to know of being small, until I saw once black against the snow, a shrew, trapped in my footprint, jump and fall, and jump again and fall, the hole too deep, the walls too tall. So when you're ready, you can come back to your computer, but hopefully, at least we're setting the intention that even though we're looking at screens, we are prioritizing our own physical, mental health, and well-being just for a minute. A minute is better than no minutes. So I'm going to get started. You'll forgive me, I hope, for this incredible amount of text on the screen. You don't need to read it. I'm going to read it out loud, but I wanted to start with, in my research, a section that jumped out to me as to why I hope you're all here with me today and why I wanted to share this topic. It says, most people know intuitively that there is something magical about the experiences offered to children by the outdoors. We grew up hearing our parents and grandparents tell us stories about their childhood summers spent playing outside, interrupted only by a parent's call to come inside for dinner. And the quote continues with specific examples if you'd like to read it. But we who advocate for children's greater access to rich outdoor experiences, that's all of us, I hope, can no longer rely only on nostalgic anecdotes. Even our firsthand observations of the children in our care are not enough. Our 21st century society demands research to give credibility to our practices. We must be able to show a link between young children's connections with nature and their healthy development. The good news is that we, as child developmentalists, can meet that challenge. So in order to connect to that quote and share with you today my goal of talking about the social emotional learning benefits of outdoor learning and how to maximize them, I just want to give you a preview of what's to come. So I'll start with some introductions about myself and actually a little bit I'd like to learn about all of you who are here today. The basics of SEL or social emotional learning and OL or outdoor learning. Right, some basic definitions we can make sure we're all entering on common ground. Then some research support from peer-reviewed research that is recent and not so recent from all over the world. If you've done any outdoor learning research yourself, you'll know that while it's burgeoning in the United States, a lot of the research comes from Canada, Germany, Denmark, Finland. And then we'll talk a little bit about theory. So pedagogical theory, educational theory, child development theory, and frameworks and methods in the greater educational sphere that connect so well to outdoor learning. Action steps for how you yourself can maximize these benefits in your own learning space, whatever that may be, and some resources for greater learning past this hour. So that's my plan. I'll start with introductions. So as I already said, my name is Maia Mitchell. I currently work as the Education Director at Montclair Community Farms, or MCF. As the Education Director, I act as lead educator in almost all of our educational programming, but I also run all the administrative aspects of our programs as well, making sure that we are providing garden education, environmental education, ecological education, on-site, off-site, to as much of the community as we possibly can. Prior to this position in the nonprofit sector, I was a 4th and 5th grade classroom teacher in public schools in Bergen County, which was incredibly rewarding and beneficial. And prior to that, my educational background was in early childhood education. I actually have to give a shout out to one of my greatest professors is with us here today, Dr. Amantorp. And I studied early childhood education with her, but she actually encouraged us to branch out, to consider elementary as well. And that's when I fell in love with 5th grade. But now I'm lucky in my position at MCF to be doing a lot more early childhood as well. So whether you're here from the early childhood sector, elementary schools, the alternative education sector, higher education, I hope there's a connection for all of you. And I work for Montclair Community Farms, which is a small nonprofit in Montclair, New Jersey. Our mission at MCF is to educate and engage the community around sustainable farming, affordable food access, and healthy living. And our farm team works on the farming and food access portion and the growing sites. And then I lead our education team working on the educational and community engagement components. Of course, there's crossover there as well. This is a peek at what Montclair Community Farms looks like. If there was a little cognitive dissonance when you heard that, because you know Montclair and you're thinking there's not a farm in Montclair, we are certainly a micro farm or urban farm, or you can think of a large scale garden. So you see in our space here quite a bit of raised beds, our chicken coop, and we also have an apiary on site as well. And I'd love to know a little bit about each of you, just so that I can better meet your needs in this presentation, right? Because the needs of a classroom teacher are very different than the needs of an administrator. Though someone working at a nature center is different than someone working in a public school. So if you wouldn't mind, each of you to please just put into the chat your name, your group or school or organization, and your position. So for example, I would put Maia Mitchell, I put Montclair Community Farms, although I could put nonprofit if you prefer to be more general. And then I put outdoor educator and administrator. So if everyone would just take a minute to do that so that I can know a little more about who I'm talking to.
It looks like the majority of the group are non-formal educators.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing as well, which is wonderful.
This is a great group, by the way.
Thank you all for taking the time to join me today and sharing a little bit about you. I know that more and more people are sharing. Oh, hi, Michelle. Michelle from Van Vleck is here. Let's see. Okay, and the other thing that Anne and I think both already forgot is that I did make these slides viewable and live because oh, thank you, Anne. I hate when I don't know until the end if someone's going to share. So that URL that Anne just put into the chat, the tiny URL, which looks like it was auto-generated, but I wrote that. It's SEL and OL. It gets you these slides live. So you can just click on that, know that you'll have it. Don't have to worry about taking notes or screen grabbing. And of course, we know that Angie's going to share this recording as well. So a quick bit on the baseline of what are SEL and OL, or social emotional learning and outdoor learning. So this is the definition of social emotional learning from CASEL, which is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, really at the forefront of SEL in that jargon in our educational culture. So SEL is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. Hopefully that's in line with what you all thought it was. And here's a quick video from KSEL. I'm gonna hope it works.
Think about the young people in your lives and all the different places where they're learning about themselves, how to relate to others, and work together on goals. How can we intentionally create learning experiences that will help all young people develop and maintain positive relationships, become lifelong learners, and contribute to a more caring, just world? Educators, researchers, community members, families, and the students themselves agree. What we need is social and emotional learning, or SEL. SEL is the process through which young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that help us to understand ourselves, connect with others, achieve our goals, and support our communities. We all need opportunities to learn and engage in environments where we feel safe, valued, and a sense of belonging. So how does SEL help schools, families, and communities work together so that all young people have these kinds of learning experiences and achieve success in education, careers, and life? CASEL's framework identifies 5 areas of competence that together help us develop a healthy sense of who we are, manage stress, understand the views of others, and work together to create schools and communities where everyone can grow their strengths and interests. Self-awareness is about how we think about ourselves and who we are. It includes understanding our culture, our thoughts, feelings, and what we believe we're capable of, and understanding how these things can influence our behaviors and beliefs. Self-management is the ability to manage those emotions, thoughts, and actions in different situations so that we can achieve individual and collective goals. This includes coping with stress and anxiety, persevering through challenges, and taking action to create positive change. Social awareness is how we understand others, how we learn to take different perspectives and empathize even with people who are different from us. It also includes understanding how the broader norms and systems around us influence how we develop and create a sense of belonging. Relationship skills are how we connect and engage effectively with others, and how we form lasting friendships and connections. This includes communicating clearly, solving problems together, managing conflict and disagreements, and standing up for ourselves and the rights of others. Lastly, responsible decision-making is how we put it all together to make caring and constructive choices. This includes thinking critically about consequences, analyzing the impact of our actions on ourselves and others, and identifying solutions that support our collective well-being. We continue to develop and practice SEL throughout our lives and can adapt and apply these competencies across different contexts and cultures. How we develop SEL is impacted by our environments, which is why we need to work together across classrooms, schools, families, and communities. In the classroom, students can be explicitly taught SEL.
So I'm skipping that bit about how it can happen. That's what we're going to talk about. But so you see here, this is what they talked about, the CASEL 5. So these are the 5 main domains that they consider to be incorporated into what social emotional learning is. Hopefully that's in line with what you all came in with expecting that it was. And then I also want to make sure we're all on the same page about what we mean by outdoor learning, right? So that, in the research about outdoor learning, it often means things like forest schools, forest preschools, forest kindergartens, nature preschools, residential and semi-residential programs, garden education. But as you all, as alternative educators know, it can mean any form of nature-based learning, any form of nature play, and a variety of experiences outdoors. So really anything under the umbrella of learning that is happening outdoors. We're going to talk about today how in that wide variety, there's a difference in which ones make the most impact on children's social emotional learning and how You can modify your programs as needed if you're working more towards social emotional learning goals, but they really are all encompassed by outdoor learning. In fact, that's what a lot of the research brings to light, is that the impacts vary based on the programs and the types of outdoor learning that are included. So my question for all of you is how actually I started when I started working on this presentation. Why do outdoor learning experiences contribute to social emotional competencies? So Anne gave the little session description in the beginning of the session, right? My thinking in proposing this presentation to Anjie was that I know that environmental educators all believe in the power of outdoor learning for a variety of reasons, and a lot of those fall under the umbrella of social emotional learning and social emotional competencies. I know that we know this work is valuable, but if you think back to the quote I shared in the beginning of the session, unfortunately, in the society that we live in, there are a lot of barriers to outdoor learning experiences for children, and we need to be able to argue and justify for this work with more than just our own anecdotes, nostalgia, and beliefs. And so research does support this, but I'm curious about what you all think as to the why. Why do you think that outdoor learning experiences contribute to social emotional competencies? What aspects of outdoor learning are the things that are beneficial? And this could be in 1 or 2 words. We're not asking for a dissertation here, but I'd love it if you'd share in the chat just a couple of examples of aspects of outdoor learning that you think contribute to social emotional competencies. What is it about it that's so powerful? Thank you, Tanya. So everybody, there's no wrong answers here. We're all educators, we all know that. Right, empathy, unstructured play, choice, movement, connection making, calmness. I agree, Susan. Place making, connection building, the open-ended nature, automatic gain of respect, fresh air for our lungs and for the mental aspect. We know of deep breaths, like I asked you all to take in the beginning, sense of confidence, sense of wonder, connection, curiosity. A lot of people talking about connection, exploration. Oh, I love this one, that the space is dynamic. Definitely. Thank you all for sharing. I know some people are probably still typing in, oh, fun. And yes, you can put more than one in there. So while you all continue sharing, before I share my ideas, I also want to share a quick little vignette that might prompt more ideas. So as I'm reading this aloud, I'd love it if you would continue to type in if new ideas come in that you didn't say or didn't see. Imagine you've just entered a natural outdoor play area with a small group of young children. A squirrel skitters by on a branch. You hear the buzz of a bumblebee before it lands on a flower. A crow calls from its perch overhead as it watches you walk by. The children turn to you with questions about all the action. Where is the squirrel going? What is the bee called? Is it dangerous? What is the crow saying? Your conversation continues for several minutes as you observe the animals' movements together. Within minutes, the children become actively engaged with their environment. One child lifts up a rock to find out what's under it, while another picks up a stick to find out if it can be snapped easily or might make a good tool. You watch as they investigate, test, and imagine. There's plenty of room to run and jump and maybe even things to climb, and the children test their balance, stretch to reach a new height, and squeeze into small spots. You encourage them as they move their bodies in big and small ways. The children might work together to build a fort or to hide in, or dig a trench for water to flow through, or make a mud pie for you to pretend to eat. You show them possibilities they hadn't considered when you point out new puddles that have formed, or a small pile of sticks and rocks that someone has brought to the play area. You notice a child that appears to be ready for a break from the play. She finds a quiet spot under a shrub where she can be alone to watch or think or listen to the sound of the breeze through the leaves. You might reflect that you also feel like your time outdoors has provided some mental renewal. So I hope that that gave you a little bit more of an idea, right? We talked about more multisensory, going at your own pace, cooperation, imagination, teamwork. Wonderful, wonderful ideas. So thank you all for sharing. And your ideas are right in par with what I was thinking as well. So when I brainstormed, here are the major things that I came up with: independence and freedom, unstructured, not just for the play and the learning opportunities, but the social opportunities as well. Self-directed, promoting agency, risk assessment, risk management, cooperation, teamwork, problem solving, critical thinking, a very rich sensory environment. And I'm going to add that word dynamic that I heard before. Hands-on physicality, excitement, curiosity, novelty, fun, that sense of wonder. And so, of course, we can work very hard to add these into our indoor classrooms as well. But when they're inherently a part of the outdoor classroom, that's why we know it's so powerful to get children outdoors to have these opportunities. So here's some research support you can use to back up any conversations you're having with any skeptics, if you'd like, in your life. So besides just our own anecdotal support, right, phenomenological validity, that we know it because we see it every day in our work and our lives, we also have studies and meta-analyses that have found statistically significant support for improvements in everything you see on the left. And I'm only including here social emotional skills, since that's the topic. I didn't connect, the physical health benefits, academic benefits, and reduce the things here on the right. So if you went up to any school district administrator or board of ed and handed them just this one sheet and said, I have something that can do this, they would say, oh, give me that curriculum. I'll pay whatever it costs. I need that for my students. So that's why I believe that we need this to kind of justify the work we all believe in. Again, I'm going to ask you to forgive me for such small text here on the screen, but this is a screenshot I took from an article from a Canadian study. It was published in the Early Childhood Education Journal, in which they interviewed primary school teachers to see what they thought were the benefits of outdoor learning. And they categorized them into themes and sub-themes. And what I loved about this example for all of us to look at here today is the direct examples, right? So we know these parts in the themes and the sub-themes are related to social emotional learning, but when you really give that coloring of the direct example of how outdoor learning relates to that, I found it very powerful. A lot of you talked about these things, right? You talked about respecting living things, and that has to do with learning and caring about others. And then here's some particularly interesting findings, or ones that stood out to me. So time itself matters. They found that fewer longer sessions of outdoor learning are more beneficial than more frequent and shorter sessions. Now, I'd like to put in the caveat that anything is better than nothing. So when I was a classroom teacher, it was much easier to get out in short, frequent sessions with the other academic demands of the day than it was for longer sessions. But keeping this in the forefront of the mind helps us to still prioritize those longer sessions. And again, if you need to justify it. Also, since the majority of us in this conversation are in alternative education or outside of the traditional sector, it's important to justify your work, right? That the value of a field trip for students to your location or for the workshops that you run, because those longer exposures have a greater impact. I love this part about relationship, right? We all know that I hope that the heart of education is relationships. The heart of life, I believe, is relationships. But what they found is that the relationships between teachers and children is more collaborative outdoors. We're more working together rather than the more didactic approach that is unfortunately often in indoor classrooms. And this is also influenced by teachers' positive experiences with the outdoors and that nostalgia we talked about in the beginning. It's also important to note that while the beneficial findings of outdoor learning are true for all students, they have shown greater effect for students who have either difficult temperaments or behavioral issues or behavioral diagnoses, that outdoor learning experiences give a greater effect, that they show fewer negative behaviors in the outdoor setting than the indoor setting, and that social emotional skill-based lessons that are given in outdoor learning settings have a greater impact than ones in indoor settings for children who are at greater need for them. And I just love this last bit that these authors in their discussion shared, that advocating for the integration of SEL into OL can help remove barriers to OL that currently stall its recognition as a valid and valuable approach to teaching and learning, right? So social emotional learning has gotten a lot of clout in the educational discourse. And so using that to capitalize on why we need outdoor learning is a very powerful tool. And so now I'm going to move into educational theory, framework, and methods and how they connect to outdoor learning. And this is really the reason I wanted to give this presentation today. So I shared in the beginning, but for anyone who came late, so I currently work in a nonprofit in doing garden education and educational administration, but my background is in the traditional path of undergraduate training as a teacher and then classroom teacher for 8 years in a public school setting. And so I really feel like that gives me a unique perspective when I'm talking about environmental education and outdoor learning. As a child, I was very, very lucky to not only be in a nature-based preschool program, but also in a lot of outdoor learning experiences my parents were able to provide for me. And when I was training to be an educator, I then learned about so much educational theory, the best practices in classroom education, and realized how much those connect. And then in my time in the classroom, I was able to do that more and more to see how those connect, so that now in my current position, I'm able to connect that knowledge of best practices in education to best practices in environmental education. So that's really the work I'd like for us to think about today, is how we can connect what we know are best practices and what people believe are best practices in the indoor classrooms with what we know are the best practices of outdoor learning, to connect them all together. So I'll start with early childhood philosophy, and of course, this doesn't just apply to early childhood. It's important to note that, right? Best practices for young children are best practices for all children. I loved when someone put in the chat, why don't we continue doing these things as adults? And some people said, yeah, we do, right? We know that we need nature breaks. We know that we need natural play. So important to think about that. Just because we're talking about early childhood philosophies doesn't mean they're just for children who are under 5. But the major early childhood philosophies I want to touch upon are Montessori and Waldorf and Reggio Emilia. Also, for those of you who don't have traditional training in these areas, right? Oftentimes people throw out, especially Montessori, when they're talking about play-based preschools. So I say like, oh yeah, you know, it's Montessori. But these are very, very specific theories and practices. So if you are talking about something more general, like the preschool that I went to is play-based, or most schools will develop their own philosophy and not use these terminologies. but they do have crossover, right? So Montessori is really about that enriched environment, very, very specifically designed materials that children are self-directed to pace themselves through, and a lot of hands-on learning with those materials. Waldorf philosophy is a lot about the whole child. So not just as an academic learner, but life skills, global citizens, free thinking, arts, nature, a lot of emphasis on natural materials, a lot of wood-based materials, a lot of creative and imaginative play. And Reggio Emilia, although if you're a school in the United States, you're Reggio Emilia inspired. Only Reggio Emilia is like champagne. If you're not in Champagne, it's sparkling wine, right? So it's Reggio Emilia inspired approach. Anywhere outside of the city in Italy is a major emphasis on the arts. The idea that the child is capable, that the parents and community are as important as the teachers, and really on the enriching environment. Sometimes the environment's called the third teacher. And you may hear things about provocations and loose parts and documentation. Reggio Emilia inspired is really gaining a lot of traction in the past couple of years, even in mainstream public education. So I also wanted to connect to popular pedagogical strategies that are popular right now in general education, so K to 12. Sometimes we think of these as jargon, right? So these are terms that you probably hear a lot: inquiry-based learning, place-based learning, or PBE, popularized by David Sobel, self-directed learning, hands-on learning, multisensory instruction. And what I'm hoping you're getting from these last two slides is that all of these things that these strategies emphasize and put importance on are the same things that we all said the outdoor environment naturally provides, right? So these philosophies that teachers take hours and hours and hours and hours of training in, rewrite curriculum to meet, we all know happen in the outdoor and learning environment. I also wanted to connect to behavioral strategies and classroom management approaches. So one that's very popular, that's near and dear to my heart, that I've received a lot of training in and very much believe in, is the responsive classroom approach. And so responsive classroom is about engaging academics and positive community, effective classroom management, developmental awareness, really focusing on making sure that academics are engaging, that they are that all your practices are developmentally appropriate to the age and stage of the child, that you're using effective classroom management that is respectful, appropriate, again, developmentally appropriate, and building community. So most of my time in the general classroom, I was utilizing the responsive classroom approach every day. And I find that the strategies I gained through that approach really connected well to trying to utilize outdoor learning. So that's my purpose in bringing that up here today. So here's some examples of practices. Again, I'm sorry for so much text on the slide, but examples of practices from responsive classroom approach that relate. So interactive modeling is a practice for teaching procedures and routines. So that could be as simple as entering and exiting the classroom, lining up, but it could be academic and social skills. The social skills piece I find for outdoor learning is incredibly important, but also for routines that will lead to greater safety. Interactive modeling is really important for. And there is a very specific approach to it in RC, but for our purposes today, just to think about that, rather than the teacher modeling the correct behavior and then the children just mimicking it, it's a more interactive process where the children name and explain and model themselves what the positive behavior would be so that they take more ownership of it, if I could synthesize it into a small bit. Teacher language is a really important component that we can all always work on, always. In undergrad, we had to record a lesson and then listen to it for how many times. We either used inappropriate, like not the best teacher language, or said or or things like that, which makes you cringe, but it's very powerful. So it's about proactive language, intentional language, making sure that you are not using sarcasm or things that are developmentally inappropriate for the age group, making sure that you are noting positive behaviors rather than just correcting negative behaviors, very important. And then also thinking about structures like morning meeting, which might be a little more generally recognizable. Some people use just morning meeting and they don't do the rest of the RC approach, but it's about community gathering together in a circle in a specific structure. But even if you just think about circle time, or in my work now, I call it morning circle or class circle, just to start the day, can be a diluted version of the RC approach. Establishing rules together with the class and making them be what you do, not what you don't do. It's a very powerful approach that I take into my work on the farm at the beginning of every new class. When I start a class that's going to be an ongoing weekly class for a session. In RC, the main 3 rules that you always kind of dilute down to, although the children generate them, is respect yourself, respect others, respect the environment. And so those are the main 3 that you can always use. Everything fits underneath them. Energizers are another word for brain breaks, really powerful tool. Quiet time in RC is for after the very stimulating time of recess and lunch, whether it be positive or negatively stimulating for children in terms of gross motor and social interactions, giving them a set amount of time to quiet down and self-regulate. And I know that some of us mentioned that in the positive aspects of outdoor learning is giving you quiet time to be more mindful, to take time to yourself, that there's a sense of calm and peace. So I definitely connect quiet time to outdoor learning as well. But if you are engaging in outdoor play that is much more sensory stimulating, it can be powerful to then, when you come back inside, to mandate that children take a quiet break there. And closing circle is like the opposite of morning meeting. So you gather together in a circle to reflect, but I do feel that reflection is an incredibly important part of making sure that outdoor learning is as successful as possible for children. And continuing on the idea of behavioral support and intervention. The last thing I'll say is some of you might be aware of this. So PBIS, or positive behavioral intervention and support, also known as the pyramid model, also known as MTSS, RTI, tiers of intervention, very popular right now in terms of behavioral intervention. But to tap into what is most important, if you look here on the right, this is the pyramid model for social emotional learning. And the idea is that tier 1 universal support that all students get is nurturing and responsive relationships and high quality supportive environments. So the environment itself is a universal support that all children need. So I'm running low on time. I'm going to go a little more quickly here. So putting theory into action. What does this mean for your learning space? One major theme, and everything I've already mentioned here hopefully has been clear, is environment. Environment. Sensory rich environments with natural materials, loose parts, prompts and provocations. Green schoolyards is a great example. And I wanted to note, some people, if you're familiar with loose parts, you might see shared a lot these gorgeous classrooms from very high-end private schools with beautiful materials, perfectly set up for the children. But it's important to note that in a natural play area, loose parts could mean all of these things here: water, sand, dirt, sticks, pebbles, stones. Here's some photo examples, both from my classroom teacher days and my outdoor educator days. So the environment itself is rich, even if you don't have the structure or the funds necessarily to create what we might think of when we think of designing an outdoor classroom. So I just wanted to note that here in the picture on the right, what's rich about the environment here is that the children turned over a rotting pumpkin and found all the pill bugs hiding inside, right? That is something that people other than this group might think of as gross or disgusting. And we know that is an incredibly rich experience, right? You see here a picture of my outdoor learning students sliding on a piece of ice, right? These are found parts of the environment, nothing that I created or set up, just things we notice and capitalize on. Here you see the children just digging in our wood chips. They're not digging for anything. They're not planting anything. They just want to dig. They want to play with adult tools. They want to use their bodies to explore, investigate. Let's let them. On the left here is, I was very lucky to have a wooded area behind the school that I worked at. So this is the outdoor classroom there, but I share it because it was relatively easy to set up. It was an Eagle Scout project from a student who had gone to the school previously, and it's just stumps in a clearing in the woods. Here's a picture of how the environment is rich where I work at the farm, right? These are just raised beds, but they give the children opportunity to explore, test their balance, take risks. And here's an example inside my classroom of a provocation here with some natural materials. So you can bring the outdoors inside. You see, I have that same book of poems I read to you all from, a read aloud I had done with the children. And my classroom was in the 5th grade. So when I say children, I'm not just talking about little ones here. And these are natural materials that I had brought into the classroom. And then the children took ownership to start to add to it themselves. So they added leaves and chestnuts and feathers. The next big point I want to hit on is maximum exposure, getting children out as often as possible for as long as possible. I'm going to go a little quicker into this. It's much more of an issue for those in the general classroom, since almost everybody in here is working for a nature center or environmental organization. Then I don't think you need to justify going outside as much as classroom teachers do, but I can talk about this in Q&A if people are more curious. But here's an example of my class going outside for snack, and then the 5th graders all decided on their own to stand on a log and see if they could balance together as a unit, right? There's cooperation, risk management, prosody. Here's again an example outside for snack. I have to add the caveat, this was in fall 2020. So that's why everyone is socially distanced, even though they're outside eating a snack, unfortunately. Here you see a great idea for taking children out on short walks is making them themed walks. So you can have one day a mindful walk, one day a 5 senses walk. And this one was called on the left is a collection walk. A great idea I got from another conference, take a piece of tape, put it over around your wrist backwards. So the sticky part is outside and the children stick on collections onto their wrists so they don't have to hold it in their hands. On the right, a great provocation for students. We used to do something called Think Outside the Box Thursdays. For time reasons, I'm not going to get into that bit right now, but this was, it would say, this is not a blank, and the children had to fill in the picture. So outdoors, this was not a stick, and a child created an alligator. And then in the middle, you see me on Global School Play Day, which I'll talk about in a little bit, although again, that's more for classroom teachers. The main point here that I really want to make sure to hit on is minimal intervention, right? You all talked about that in the chat. Unstructured, free play, self-guided. This is what makes it the most meaningful for children's social emotional learning, that they are directing their learning, they are guiding their learning, they are testing their limits, they are seeing the consequences. You are there to observe, to support, to help them reflect, to help them notice things they might not be noticing, to bring them into the spaces that will create these opportunities. And when people are having trouble with this, I fall back on the Global School Play Day philosophy, which I love, which says, don't interfere with your students unless you see something that could get you fired or physically will hurt a child. And that doesn't include being uncomfortable. I struggle with this when my students at the farm want to stick their whole hand into ice water. And then I know that the next 3 hours, they'll be crying about their fingers being frozen. But they do that one time and they learn, I have backup gloves inside. And then the next week, they've learned about that risk-taking behavior. Here's some examples of my students in 5th grade out with no intervention from me, learning about how to move their bodies. Obviously, this makes you a little uncomfortable. What if someone were to get hurt? But you have to trust that they won't do things that will make their bodies unsafe. Here's my students at the farm doing the same thing, playing with ice, trying to figure out how to break it. Rain that collected in a container. It's an enriching environment. For time reasons, I'm not going to get into this either, but this is about pre-teaching and setting expectations. So if you are going to give children and youth that much freedom and lack of intervention on your part, it doesn't mean you don't talk to them. You talk to them before and you talk to them after. That's the main point that I want to make. So you ask them, what do we need to do to be successful outside? What are your expectations of each other? What will you need in order to be successful outside? And then you reflect afterwards as well. So these are charts of my 5th grade students generating their own expectations of each other and of teachers for Global School Play Day. And then reflecting at the end in a journal, in a closing circle, community all together, or if an issue does arise in problem-solving conferences with the student to make a solution for the future. These are some examples. I'm not going to read out loud because you all have access to the slides. And here are some resources that I'm also not going to read out loud because you all have access to the slides. We'll share them again in the chat. But just know that this information is out there. You're not reinventing the wheel. So if you don't already use resources like Green Schoolyards, the Children in Nature Network, NAEE, the North American Association for Environmental Education, and NatStart, or again, Global School Play Day is a little bit more for people in the general classroom, but if any of you here are parents or family members, you can read into it and advocate for it for your loved ones. NAE has amazing guides and frameworks. So there's the Social, Emotional, and Environmental Education Development Framework, that's SEED, basically trying to do exactly what I was saying, connecting what we know is best in early childhood education and environmental education and social emotional learning and putting it together into a framework. There's also a nature-based preschool professional practice guidebook. I will say that's a paid resource, but you can download the introduction for free. And that's what I read from when I read aloud. And the Guidelines for Excellence series from NAE is also excellent for all different settings. So check that out on your own time. Here's some recommended books. Some of these have also been mentioned in other sessions previously in the conference. If you haven't read Last Child in the Woods, every single one of you should go read it. Seminal work from Richard Louv. Wonderful, fascinating, amazing. Also Childhood in Nature from David Sobel, who created the idea of place-based education, is excellent as well. And now a little bit over the time I wanted to be, I'm going to say thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing and open for any questions and answers, but thank you all for your time. If you want to reach out to me.
I think this is fantastic, and thank you for such a wonderful presentation that touched the theory part and led us to all the practice and all the tips that you have given us to make this a reality. So I really appreciated that concept, and the way you also engaged us throughout the presentation was really interesting, because many times we keep sitting and there's like no engagement and the presentation goes on for such a long time. So thank you for doing that and having us as a part of your class today. So I don't know if there are any questions from anyone. If you can raise your hand or maybe unmute and ask.
I do.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
go ahead, Bailey.
All right. Yeah, this was incredible. I really enjoyed this. This has been my favorite presentation so far through ANJEE. But I really like the concept of just science and context. I feel like they make so many more connections when they're, actually living it, and they maintain those connections for a really long time. But sorry, my question is kind of unrelated to that, but what would you recommend for teachers and students that live in areas like Jersey City or Newark that might not be able to get into a green space that's kind of close to where they are?
Yeah, what a great question. So there just as there's so much research available on everything I talked about, there is such a variety of research on what you're talking about natural education in urban environments. It's also part of the guidelines from NAE that I shared. One of them is about urban spaces. And the book I shared, Vitamin N, talks about that a little bit. But I would just really be aware of that an outdoor experience and all the benefits we talked about can happen in what we might not think of as enriching environment, especially if you look closely, right? So ecology is thriving everywhere, including in urban spaces, right? There are living organisms everywhere. You just have to look closely. And so I would say that still taking that time to be outside in a little bit more organic spaces, and thinking about, if you take time to look over the slides later, look at each of those benefits and examples, especially in the screenshot that I shared that had the topics, the subtopics, and the examples. Read over each of those and think for yourself, how can that be done in an urban environment? Because it certainly can happen. You have to work for it a little bit more, but it certainly can happen. I think outdoor is the key here, right? Not necessarily that it has to be forest or garden. It's about being outside.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for your question.
I want to expand on that too. If you can at least give the urban setting, give the kids a boundary. I know in a couple of the schools where I was teaching in urban settings, they had like a gated courtyard, and being in that gated courtyard, we could give them a little unsupervised, well, not unsupervised, unstructured play that they're investigating. You know, you give them targets, say, hey, I want you to go to this section and I want you to look at the ground and tell me what you're seeing, and go to this section. I want you to look up and tell me what you're seeing. And sometimes if you don't have a lot of natural area, they can at least get something, because in one spot in the middle of New Brunswick, we saw birds flying over. So there are things out there in the urban settings, just harder to find.
Maya, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed this presentation so much, and so proud of you. I just had to say that. One thing I think that was really good about it, and that I found interesting and I think about a lot, is kind of this the idea of the importance of the class managements that carry over. It's interesting with the more non-formal education, they're having children primarily outdoors and maybe bringing them in a little bit. And the challenge of the traditional is they're primarily indoors and you're bringing them outdoors a little bit. But in both cases, you have that need for kind of how do you deal with different personalities? How do you do the challenging behaviors? And I think Responsive Classroom is a great resource. They have videos, by the way, if people are interested, if they don't know that one. They have like a whole a YouTube channel. But what have you found, like with connections between like the challenges you face in the traditional classroom or the gen ed and the farm ones? Are there differences?
Yeah, they're totally different. Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked that. Because most people here are non-traditional, I'll just talk about the challenges there a little bit more, but I found it very challenging. I thought that I'd move to the farm and suddenly just have all the opportunities that I was missing in the classroom and be able to do everything I wanted. And the main barrier that I find is the lack of consistent access. So because as a classroom teacher, I worked so hard on setting routines and building relationships, being with children every single day for extended periods of time was how I knew how to make that possible. And so then coming into more non-traditional or non-formal education and seeing students once a week for a shorter period of time made it much harder at first to set those norms. So I had to go back to the drawing board and really think about, well, my first class should be doing all the things I do in the first 6 weeks, but an abbreviated version, right? And that I still am going to intervene with correct teacher language, and that I can still pull a child aside and have a private conversation about a behavior rather than addressing it in front of everyone. But really having shortened lessons and shortened exposure that was the most difficult part of doing these things that I had used so much time and routine building to do in the past, I found.
I hate cutting you off because I'm loving this.
I know, but we're out of time.
Yeah, we're out of time, so I have to read our closing remarks. Thank you again, Maya. It has been wonderful. I really enjoyed this myself, and it's kind of nice getting that little bit of information that we can take to schools. Is like, this is why you have to book trips for your kids. But just a few reminders before we close out the session. I did see that we have our link in the chat. Thank you very much. So that please fill out your evaluations for the conference. Again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can see any presentations you might have not been able to attend live. Also, thank you again to our conference sponsors, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, our anonymous donor, and the Institute for Natural History Arts. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Excellent job, Maya.
Thanks.
Excellent. Now you get to enjoy your weekend. Bye.
Bye, thank you.